So I guess to start with, because I get the impression that you're definitely not a first generation fan. How did this all start for you? What was your gateway to becoming the Beatle fan that you became?
I actually got introduced to the Beatles through the anthology. I was probably around 11 or 12.
Oh, interesting. I think you're the
Yeah,
first person
yeah,
I've heard that was their gateway. Plenty of people, Red and
really.
Blue album, plenty of people
Mhm.
love, and I imagine someday there's going to be people that got in because of Get Back. But that's cool.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. So it's funny because I think back during that time during the 90s, there was a little bit of nostalgia for kind of like psychedelic stuff. And like I remember kind of being into fashion, in like middle school and like bell bottoms and kind of like the hippie thing was in style. And so when I saw things like Magical Mystery Tour, it was like, oh, this is so relevant. And I my parents had a few Beatles albums. And so I started putting those on the record player, and then kind of just got hooked and tried to sink my teeth into everything I could find.
And that's interesting because this is the CD era, but you're still getting Beatle music through vinyl at that time in the 90s when you were picking up on that stuff?
Yeah, I think my parents had the Sergeant Pepper CD, but
Uh-huh.
they had the White Album, vinyl, and what else they might have had Magical Mystery Tour vinyl
Uh-huh.
too.
And these are
And
very
Abbey Road.
visual, these
Yeah,
packages with the book in it
yes,
and everything. It just pops. So you're that
yeah,
young. It would be almost
yeah.
like child entertainment, really.
Yeah, so it was really, really cool. So
That's
that was
cool.
my gateway.
Did you find yourself unique among your peer group as far as this attraction to the Beatles, or were your peers kind of open to that sort of thing too?
Um, I don't think anybody was against it or kind of thought it was nerdy or anything. Um, I had a couple friends who kind of would humor me and listen to the music with me in the car. Um, but I think I was by far the most diehard Beatle fan that I knew at my school. So
Uh-huh.
yeah.
And so there weren't too many of you people probably at that time.
No, no, and actually, when this whole thing happened at the Paul concert recently, I posted about it, and a girl from my high school that I, vaguely kind of knew, she messaged me and said, "Oh my God, I never knew you were this like that into the Beatles in high school. I wish I would have known because I was a huge Beatles fan too."
Wow.
So
A closet
yeah,
thing. That's so
yeah,
cool. Wow.
yeah.
So you're absorbing the music. Were you like systematic about it, like trying to track down everything, find the discographies, and you just burn through everything one after the other? Because you're clearly not getting into them in sequence, right? It's like
Right.
what's around you, and then you have to track down the rest of the stuff.
Well, I started with what I had in the house, and then I went to the anthology CDs
Hmm.
because, those came out. And so then I kind of blew through those. And then, yeah, after kind of going through those, I then started to kind of systematically go through all the different, albums. And it's funny, for a long time, I was really confused about like, why the singles weren't there. Like knew them from the anthology, and I,
Uh-huh.
had read about some of the singles, but I don't know, in my high school brain, I didn't quite put together like why are these not here? And so
That's
for
not a
a
greatest
long
hits.
time,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So
So that's pretty interesting that your entry into Beatle world was like through their rough notes, through not
yeah,
their catalog. And it'd be like the equivalent of somebody of my age who didn't have the catalog getting into them through their bootlegs
right,
and
exactly.
not a real context for anything.
Yeah, like the first time I remember I heard "And Your Bird Can Sing," like I just knew that from the anthology version where they're giggling the whole time,
Right.
and yeah, so it was definitely interesting.
Yeah, it's got to be something unique to your generation that you had a lot less of a roadmap, and what you did have that was immediate in your world, in your environment, was not point A. It was something
Mhm.
farther from that. So that's really interesting. So as you're getting into all the music, did you eventually like track down all the standard canon releases?
Yeah, eventually I did. I think I ended up getting all of them except for uh, I guess it was Revolver. For some reason, I just never got Revolver, which I know is like your favorite. I mean, I discovered it later, and it's great and everything. But it's funny because that one in particular, it feels like a little disjointed for me because I feel like I had all the other ones, and for whatever reason, I just didn't have that one.
Yeah.
And so like whereas the other ones, I feel like it's just, I hear them and I can sense the next song coming. That one, it just isn't quite as ingrained as the rest, but it's a fantastic, fantastic album. I do have this distinct memory of one Christmas morning getting Beatles for Sale, the CD, and I was so disappointed because I was like, this is like the one that I don't want, But,
That's interesting.
yeah.
And so because this was a CD era, this would be the
Yeah.
British iterations you were getting into. So
Mm-hmm.
yesterday and today, Beatles 65 would have meant nothing to you.
No, I knew about Yesterday and Today because of like the cover,
Uh-huh.
so I kind of read about that, but yeah, I never was familiar with any of the American iterations.
Yeah. And so that sequencing wouldn't have been ingrained in you because you've come into it as the Beatles intended, as it were.
Yeah.
Although, as you described, with anthology being the stuff that you were getting first exposure to, and then the actual CDs, it must have been strange to then catch up on the hit singles via past masters, because those are
Mm-hmm.
they're compilations of a sort, and not really they're strictly done to scoop up the stuff chronologically, not really sequenced. There's plenty of people I know closer to my age that Hey Jude was an early album for them, and that's another oddball compilation, but at least it runs chronologically, and the songs hang together well. It's sort of a bypassing the psychedelic, but starting with Can't Buy Me Love and running through Ballad of Johnny and Yoko, kind of an interesting cross section of the Beatles. So, and definitely
Mm-hmm.
people in the 70s were served with rock and roll music, love songs, red and blue albums. You had different ways of getting into them compilation wise, but at least it was the finished product and not the demos and alternate takes
Yeah.
and live takes that you were getting. So that's really kind of interesting. So you're absorbing the content. At what point, beyond the anthology itself, were you then getting into the literature that was out there?
Yeah, I mean, at the time, I was pretty young and I started getting to Beatles before I could drive, and so it was just it's kind of limited to what was at the library,
Mm-hmm.
what happened to be at Barnes and Noble, by chance. And that was kind of it. I mean, obviously like, the internet was around, but it wasn't like it is today,
Right. People didn't have the
Um,
smartphones either.
yeah, so and probably back then you were probably charged by the minute, so I don't think I probably was spending exorbitant amounts of time online. So yeah, I was kind of just limited to what happened to be around at the time. Oh,
Sorry, I muted myself because there was a clock going off in this room and I didn't want that to drown out what I was saying. So edit. So do you remember what some of the early books were that you read?
you know, it's funny. I remember the covers, but I don't remember the names.
Uh-huh.
I think one of them was Beatles Forever, though.
Oh, wow.
Um, yeah,
Okay.
and the Hunter Davies book too. Like that's just kind of so classic.
Yeah.
Um,
You can't
but
really go wrong with either one of those in terms of early gateway information books. I mean, the Hunter Davies book obviously is very deep, and
yeah,
the Schaffner book has long since been superseded by better information coming out. But still, lavishly illustrated. It's just such a feast for the
Mhm.
eyes. So readable, so quotable. For people closer to my age, it was Illustrated Record was one of the first things you got, which had the full size reproduction of the album covers, and so you have that great visual aspect going on.
Oh,
I was hoping you weren't going to say Shout, because that's been so
no.
discredited now.
No, I haven't. I actually was trying to track down one of those books, trying to track down John, just because I feel like I want it. I know it has a lot of misinformation in it, but it'd just be kind of nice to
Sure.
see it and see how things evolve. So
Yeah, there are definitely
yeah.
things that are, if you're hardcore enough fan, you can read Cellar Full of Noise, knowing full well, it's kind of historical fiction. It's not strictly accurate. And if you've ever
Mhm.
read Man Who Gave the Beatles Away, it is hands down one of the most entertaining books, knowing full
Yeah.
well, he's a raconteur. He's not a historian. And
Yeah.
he's there. It's like you're sitting next to him at the bar, just here, have another one. Tell me some more. That kind of thing. So it's a lot of fun. I wish that should be the one. If they ever make another Beatle movie on the early days, I wish they would do it on that book, because it would be so fun.
Yeah.
That would really draw people to the story. So
Definitely.
did you, in your early experience, did you get to see their films?
A Hard Day's Night and Help. I saw Magical Mystery Tour. I never saw Let It Be, though.
Oh, wow.
I never saw that, and I still haven't seen it.
Really?
Yeah, which is interesting because I saw, Get Back, obviously. I've seen it a few times now. And I'm kind of like, I don't really know if I want to watch it, Let It Be,
Its reputation precedes it.
Yeah. And although, like, now I was listening to your podcast, and you were talking about, is it Doug Sulpy, and how he's kind of, unearthed some truths behind Get Back, and it might not have been as rosy as maybe he makes it out to be. I don't know. I kind of want to live in my little bubble and enjoy the way that he has it.
Sure, and that's perfectly valid, and it's a version, and that's how it should be seen. It's like any moment that happened in your life. If you gather the people that were in the room and give their tellings of it, they're not necessarily all going to be in alignment with each other. That's fine. It's their truth. And Peter Jackson is a filmmaker, and the primary purpose is to entertain and get people to sit there in front of the screen for however long he's going to put something on, which in his case tends to be very long. And he hit it out of the park as far as that goes. But as Sulpy and other people look at it that want to be, you're allowed to be critical, and they're coming from the perspective of, if people accept this as the final word truth, it's a distortion. And that's how I felt about Backbeat or Nowhere Boy or things like that. People view these things like they're documentaries, and of course they're not.
Right.
You're loaded with all kinds of things that never happened but are there for dramatic effect. It's just like if you're into Titanic and you discover there was no Jack and Rose. It's like, what do you mean this isn't how it happened? Well,
yeah,
it's a story. So that's cool that you got to see the films. Did you see Yellow Submarine? Was that part of your experience?
So it wasn't, but I have a 4-year-old, and probably, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 months ago, I introduced her to it. We bought it on Apple TV, and she loves it. It is the best thing ever. She loves it. She wants to go to Pepperland. She asks to go there all the time. So yeah, but it was really interesting to me because I, for whatever reason, I never associated some of the songs like Nowhere Man and Eleanor Rigby. I never associated them with Yellow Submarine because I knew them from the CDs. And so, watching it with her, it was just kind of like, oh my gosh, there's really good songs in here. I've actually kind of, grown to like a lot of the Yellow Submarine songs now that I have this, shared experience with her.
Yeah,
with
sure.
the movie, and now it's kind of like I see them in a very positive light. So
yeah, it was one that as a kid I was like, well, this looks awfully dated. It wasn't my thing necessarily. And as a young nitpicker, like, that's not how they look like when they recorded Nowhere Man. John didn't have a mustache. That stuff. Even there's a little residual irritation now that I have to try really hard to get past. But having Bob Hieronymus and Laura Kortner on the show now twice, and their fantastic books on the history of the making of Yellow Submarine, it is like a minor miracle unto itself how it came together and has so much meaning and is as timeless as ever, really, if you're tuned in to the right level of what it's putting out. And I can really appreciate it now. And like you say, it was your 4-year-old's gateway. I've heard that story going back to Danny Harrison, that was their first Beatle experience. So it's kind of like become this rite of passage for fandom, young people that, you're open to animation. So you're not going to watch an anthology, but this will at least introduce you to the Beatles as cartoon characters. And since the Beatles cartoon itself is not readily accessible, it's a perfectly valid way to get the overall message of the Beatles as well as a nice cross section of music. So what's not to like?
Yeah. And it's actually funny because you'll probably think I'm a total nutcase for this, but when we were designing my daughter's nursery, like my husband's very into music. And so we kind of had a music theme and, kind of cartoon renderings of, Jimi Hendrix, all this sort of thing. But one of her walls, it's a wallpaper mural of Abbey Road. And she, for the longest time, she's just been kind of like, who are these people on my wall? Like she doesn't get it. But now she gets it. Now she gets it. She's like, she knows who they all are from Yellow Submarine. So
that's so cool.
yeah,
Very
I'll have
cool.
to text you a picture of it. It's pretty interesting. Sure. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
The last time I was in England was right in the months leading up to my son being born. He's 20 now, so it's been 20 years. But in Liverpool, there was a shop that had an actual like local craftsman made a Yellow Submarine character mobile. Mm-hmm. And then, so that was above his crib for like his first year or so. We still have it. It's fantastic. But that kind of thing, at least he got acclimated to the characters and the blue meanies and all those little creatures. So it definitely has got a ubiquitous quality to it. No matter if the parents are a fan, the kids are going to get immersed in it at some point.
Yes.
Yeah. I could still, my daughter's 16 now, and in her early viewings, she was receptive enough to it, but the Liverpool Eleanor Rigby sequence where all the smokestacks go off, it scared the bejesus out of her.
Yeah, because there's like a big horn or something that comes on at that point. Yeah. I can see how that was like, scary.
No more. Yeah. So Paul has been touring a lot come the new millennium, and this tour you saw him on, had you already seen him before?
I saw him once before, early 2000s. I'm not sure what year it was, but I saw him with my mom. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, that was the last time I had seen him.
Okay. So this would be the second this year.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you reached out to me and you told me your whole story, which I thought this is so unbelievably cool. The first thing I'm thinking is it takes a particular level of commitment, of passion and knowledge to create the scenario that you did with your signage and being where you were. And it's like, there's a whole group, I don't know if you're aware of them on Facebook, the Fans on the Run, that basically follow Paul from city to city and have done this forever. So it's like, I know who they are. It's a lot of them are my friends. And it's like, it gets to the point where, you see their postings all the time. So it's like, okay, I know who I can expect to be part of this group and where they're going to be right now, because that's where Paul is tonight or whatever. So when you popped up and you're every bit as an alignment, passion-wise and knowledge-wise with these people, it's like, oh, how do I not know her? And then when I saw the video and saw the whole the stories related, like, this is so cool. So if you want to do the setup for that, and honestly, if you told me, I don't remember, but I don't know what show you saw him in.
Winston-Salem.
Okay. So is that where you live, roughly?
No, I live in Atlanta. So we just did a quick flight up. We were like kind of left and back within 24 hours. So
wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's a whirlwind. I've been getting that story a lot from people on this tour, is that a lot of people travel across multiple states to see him. For instance, he didn't come to Chicago. So maybe there'll be another wing in the fall. I don't know. But West Coast, I know he started like in the Pacific Northwest. But so it's conspicuous that he hasn't hit the big places that he typically would.
Yeah.
So, and then Glastonbury, what a nice finale to this part of everything. Did you catch any of that? Did you see any of the video or the write-ups?
I've seen some of the video and definitely some of the write-ups, but I didn't watch it in full or anything.
Yeah. So. Okay. Yeah. I've got it, but I haven't watched it yet, and I'm looking forward to that. I know the BBC cut out in spite of all the danger, but now I've got the complete. So we'll see it at some point. Okay. So tell me then, when did the idea occur to you for that particular signage going into it? Was this the kind of thing where you were sort of thinking about what can I do that's unique that would get his attention, or it just worked out that way?
It's weird. I've never brought a sign to a concert. I don't know what kind of came over me, but I've now kind of learned that he's into signs, and I really didn't know that before. I just kind of was like, I felt like there were like so many like little things I could possibly put on a sign. And I was like, I should just make a sign. And it's funny because my husband didn't think I was serious about it. And then, like the night before we're getting ready to leave, I was like, honey, I'm making the sign. And he was like rolling his eyes at me. And he's like, you're going to bring that on the plane? Like, you're bringing this on a plane with us. So, yeah, I just thought like, okay, like what could be short and simple that I can put in big enough letters on a sign, that he could possibly read. And, I think I put I heart. I'm just trying to think now I put I heart Paul Ramon.
Yeah.
And I wasn't sure if I put love or not, but yeah, I put I heart Paul Ramon. And I kind of got these letters from Amazon that like luckily looked really great on the poster board. And we got to the sound check, and I was sitting around for most of the sound check because, again, like, I don't know what to do with the sign. Like, I'm like, what do you do? And like, there was somebody who had held up a sign kind of on the other end of the sound check, and my husband's like, well, somebody's holding it up, you should just put yours up. And so I put mine up, and like almost immediately he gave this like nod towards me. I thought he did, but I wasn't quite sure. But then everybody around me was like, did you see that? Did you see that? Yeah. And so I thought,
how close were you from him? Do you have a sense of that?
It was pretty far. So like, like it was probably the whole at the back section of that whole first seated area. Like,
wow.
Yeah, it was a pretty big distance, which is a little disappointing, but I mean, it ended up working out fine. But
it was simple enough and bold enough. It caught his attention.
And, I thought, okay, that's it. Like, that was my moment. Like, this is great. And, he finished, I remember what song he was singing. He finishes the song. And, I was kind of like looking back at my husband because he was still sitting down. I was like, that's so cool. That's so cool, And Paul kind of signals for somebody to bring something out. And I'm just, not really paying attention. I see the ukulele. For a split second, I thought, he's going to play like Ramon. Because I'd heard, and maybe you know this, I'd heard that Ramon was like, alluding to Paul Ramon, but I never knew if it was true. Do you know?
That's the association that I have, my understanding is yes. And I'm pretty sure there's a quote from somewhere supporting that, but yes. That's absolutely like it's believed by a lot of people. Let's put it that way.
Yeah,
he's aware of himself if it's even if it's not deliberate.
Exactly. Even if it's not deliberate, he's probably aware of it. And so then he starts talking about Keira Knightley and like her wedding and how the song he's going to play was like her first dance. And so I'm thinking, oh, this is nothing dismissive to the song Something. I love the song Something, but I know he plays it on the ukulele. Like, it's just like, oh, it's like, such like a typical wedding song. And so I was kind of checked out. Actually, I was like, oh, like he's going to play something. I mean, it's great. And I love his rendition of it, but it was not even on my radar that he could possibly play Ramon. And he, starts to strum it. And I was like, oh my gosh, I turned to the lady that was next to me and I explained the story to her really quickly. And she was like, well, that's for you. And I was like, oh my God, I mean, I guess maybe, So then, I'm sitting there at the sign, and again, like, I'm not like a sign person. Like, what do you do with the sign? So I just kind of like, did this thing back and forth with my sign and like hopped around with it. I don't know. I mean, I felt like such a nerd, but yeah, he played the song, and then at the end, he kind of turned then to me and said, like, he said something like, I think, thank you, Paul Ramon fan, and did a little wave, and I waved back, and he did a little strum.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul Ramon fan.
And so at that point, like, my mind is blown. I'm like flipping out, like going crazy, texting everybody I know, like, this is insane. And he finishes the sound check, and then we go to do with our tickets, we had like a dinner thing that went with it. So we go to the dinner, and it's a couple hours, and then we go back out to the show. And we get to our seats, and we were sitting in the third row, which is really great. And so, yeah, like third row center. And so he comes out on the stage, and my husband's like, put up the sign for the sign. And at this point, I'm kind of feeling bad because, like, at the sound check, nobody was really behind me. But now it's like, these are people, they're not just people, they're people that, paid a lot of money for really good seats. Like, I feel really bad putting the sign up, but I put it up, real quick. And he thought I just see him mouth Paul, or just he was Ramon. And my husband and I like looked at each other. I'm like, did you see that? And so I thought, okay, that's the end of it, whatever. And everybody, I feel like, well, all like diehard Paul fans know everything is very kind of scripted at his shows. So I kind of was thinking, okay, like this is the end. Like he's not going to improvise anything. He tells all his little stories, and it's it's the same in every city. And which I would do the exact same thing. But anyway, he goes to the show, and he starts calling out signs, and of course he calls out that sign that I feel like is at every show, the one about like sign my butt, and so then he's like looking around, and I see him kind of like pause when he gets to me, and it felt like he was just staring forever at the sign, and then he goes, I heart Paul Ramon. And then I like kind of look out the corner of my eye, and I see him on the Jumbotron.
Oh, geez.
I'm like, oh my God. And he's like, most of you probably, won't understand what that means. And he goes on to tell the story about it.
I love Paul Ramon. Now, most of you won't get that, but when we were young kids, we changed our names. We thought it was really cool to have stage names, and that was mine, Paul Ramon. I sounded French.
And I was just kind of like, I can't believe this is happening, And so he told the story, and that was kind of that. But yeah, so it was incredible.
It must have been the most surreal, unbelievable thing as it's happening, like a movie or something, like out of body experience. As a fan, for as long as you've been a fan, and absorbing these guys' music and seeing them on TV and videos, and you've seen him once in concert, and now you're close enough to make eye contact, and he's right at you, acknowledging you before tens of thousands of people, and there you are in the Jumbotron besides. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. I mean, the only thing that could be bigger than that is like, having somebody hustle you backstage after their show or something. He wants to meet the person who wrote that sign.
Yeah, and I mean, it was crazy because I feel like growing up, I'd always been, a little kind of sad that I'd never grew up during Beatlemania, and I kind of always wished I had had that experience. And in that moment, especially at the sound check, when he kind of, was pointing and waving at me, like, I felt like it was like Beatlemania, I felt like it was 1964, and that was like, young Paul McCartney, and like, I was there. It was so crazy. I still can't believe it happened.
Did you have the impulse to scream in that moment?
I did not, which I guess if it was a true Beatlemania moment, I would have screamed. But
times have changed.
Yeah, it was just like you were saying, it just felt so surreal. And like, I felt like my mind, I just could not like process it at the moment. It was just so many thoughts going through my head. And so
this can't be real. I'm going to wake up from this at some moment now.
Yeah. Actually, the next morning when we woke up, I was talking to my husband, and I was like, can you believe that happened? Da, 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 da. And, I was saying the thing about the sound check. And then I was like, and then I was on the Jumbotron. He goes, I totally forgot that happened. He's like, did that really happen? And luckily I started to actually question myself, like, did it really happen? And we found the footage, luckily, but it was wild.
Wow. So your daughter, I presume, or your child, did you say daughter or son? I don't know. Your
daughter.
Okay. Was not at the show, right?
She was not. She really, she wants to go to a Beatles show, which she doesn't quite understand,
right?
But we told her we'll take her to a Paul show next time she comes, or next time he comes, So we promised her that. So, and she, we showed her videos from the concert. She really wants to see Live and Let Die because of the fire.
Right, right. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, no problem with that. Every show from 1973 on. So, yeah, it is going to be interesting that when she's so young and this happens, it's almost like, well, of course it did. My mom's a big fan. Of course it did. Like, how truly amazing is it take me another 20 years to like have that part sink in as it did with you. This doesn't just happen to everybody.
Yeah. I mean, of course, we told her, what happened, and she knows it happened, but she just does not have any sort of
right.
understanding of it. Yeah.
Did you catch the shows I did earlier this year with Allison and Deb and Carol, the fandom and the females reacting, first generation fans, through Allison more recently, just watching Get Back and fandom generally, or the thing that I did with them earlier last year for the Fab Four Con, where they're just talking about sort of explaining what is going on in the heads of screamers at Beatle concerts, what that experience is, and how in the Beatle literature and history they've been so dismissed and scoffed at as empty-headed idiots and all that sort of thing. And really, it's just a profound, life-changing experience that I have to think that you now, if you didn't before, have some sort of inkling of what that was like, given your situation.
Yeah, it's funny because I think it was from your show that I heard one of them say that the reason they were screaming was because it was just kind of how they felt like they could express their thanks, of how much they appreciated, what the music had done for them. And I get that now. Like, I definitely get that. I didn't scream, but it was in that moment, it was like, I guess in kind of waving my sign, I was kind of
silence.
Like, yes, thank you so much, like for all you've done, so I guess that was my way of doing it. But yeah, I definitely experienced that too. Like, it was just kind of this profound, like, thank you so much for everything you've done.
And it's something that no matter what the situation, crossing paths, and it could be Paul, or it could be Ringo, or it could be if you met John or George in their lifetime. But Derek Forbes, who I just had on a show from Simple Minds, runs Nepal in 1982 when Simple Minds is at the top of the world. And he's like, why are you shaking? Because you made all this happen. How it must feel on his end, but I can understand Paul must get this constantly, and he has for the last 50 plus years. And I get enough of a read of them as people that they are probably, in the spirit of gratitude, they recognize this is not something to be dismissive of. This is important. You were gifted with this profound power that millions of people around the world, you've changed their lives. You've altered their life path, but for you, maybe they would have been somewhere else, and all for the better. So I cannot, none of us, I think, can imagine what that must feel like to have that.
Yeah. I mean, I honestly don't know how he's not like, any of the Beatles while they were alive, or Paul or Ringo today. I have no idea how they are not just, complete egomaniacs, and, just, how would you not be, it just amazes me that they, seem pretty humble, for all they've accomplished. I think it blows my mind, because I feel like, just everyday people that have, very, very small, tastes of fame, can become incredibly big-headed. So
sure,
the fact that
would be the
remained,
more normal path. Yeah. This is like so off the charts profound.
The fact that they're kind of, still somewhat down to earth is just, I don't know how they do it. I don't know how.